What human rights issue should people be focusing on more than they now do? Well, I think you won't be surprised to learn, I think it's the human right to subsistence. It seems to me that we have basic interests in clean air, clean water, food, basic health care, even beyond to basic education, that these are not normally, not always anyway, thought of in terms of human rights. They're things that when people talk about human rights, they think of slavery, they think of tyranny. These are important issues, they are human rights issues, but I think the other side of the issue, the more social, economic side, is equally important and in fact connected to the civil and political. It's a global problem. It is not the sort of thing that you can point to in the same way as where you could say there's a particular violation by a particularly nasty dictator where you've got a violation of basic political rights. In this case, we're talking about something that really is a global phenomenon, and I wouldn't want to necessarily, focus on one place as being the most extreme violator of that, because it's such a large-scale problem. And as well, it's a case where the entire international political and economic system is implicated in it. So it's not something that really is easily understood in sort of localized terms. It's a global phenomenon in terms of causation of its violation. So there are local and there are international causes, and that's sort of part of an accurate telling of the story of the denial of subsistence rights, is its global impact and its global reach. In fact, strangely, that subsistence rights, the fact of people being better able to meet their subsistence needs, fewer people going hungry, relatively speaking, that actually has gotten better. And the interesting thing is not necessarily because of directly addressing it or because of increases in foreign aid. We still give tiny amounts of our GNP in foreign aid. The main reason that more people have had more secure access to subsistence and protection for their basic rights to food and water and so on is that China has gotten wealthier and India is starting to do the same. So that's an interesting sort of case because clearly you have a country in which basic civil and political rights continue to be denied, but there is no, and that is the huge issue, I think, for China and for the rest of us in relation to China. But on the other hand, it is true that as China has started to get richer, it's still not a rich country, but as it started, and it's highly unequal, but as it started to get richer, individual subsistence rights have been secured for more Chinese people. So no, I am worried about whether, even though things could continue to get better in terms of protection of basic subsistence rights, in the future what we have to think of is environmental sustainability. Can the planet sustain the 12 billion people there are likely to be, especially since all of them will quite rightly demand to have the same life standard of living that I have, which the planet could not sustain. So that's one issue. If we don't actually address climate change, if we don't address environmental sustainability as sort of job one, then all this talk about human rights is kind of beside the point, because there won't be any humans for whose rights we can protect. But on the other hand, there's the issue of the relationship between social and economic rights and civil and political rights. And the Chinese case, I think, is an example where that is not sustainable socially and politically. That is the best way to secure basic rights to food, to subsistence, is to secure basic rights to political participation, freedom of conscience, freedom of expression and association. Amartya Sen, the Nobel Prize-winning economist and political philosopher, is most famous perhaps for saying that there has never been a famine in a country with a democratic political system and a free press. So if you're concerned about subsistence and the absence of hunger, you should be equally concerned about political democracy and civil freedoms, press freedom. So that raises the question of the future of China, and the fact that even though lots of people have become better off in terms of meeting their subsistence needs, there's still the longer term question of civil and political rights in China, which is just as important as the question of subsistence, and in fact connected to it.